She had always loved music, but not many people knew it. Most of the time, she stayed in the background, quietly watching life pass by, smiling politely, and keeping her thoughts to herself. She wasn't someone who shouted about her talents or asked for attention. Music was her private world, a place where she felt safe, understood, and free. Even though she was shy and soft-spoken, she carried a deep passion for playing the piano, one that had grown steadily since she was very young. Her journey with the piano hadn't been easy. She hadn't been born into a family that could afford lessons or fancy instruments. Her piano was an old one, a little worn out, with keys that didn't always respond perfectly. Sometimes, when she pressed hard, the sound would crack, and other times, when she tried a soft note, it barely made a sound. But she had learned to love it anyway. That piano had been with her through lonely afternoons, rainy days, and nights when she couldn't sleep. She had taught herself, watched countless videos online, and spent hours practicing even when her fingers hurt, or she felt exhausted. Her family didn't fully understand her obsession with the piano. Her mother often reminded her to focus on her studies, worried that music was a hobby that wouldn't take her anywhere. Her father worked long hours, and when he came home, he was too tired to talk about anything other than bills and responsibilities. Still, they never stopped her completely. They might not have understood her, but they supported her quietly, giving her the space to follow her passion. Now, there was an opportunity she couldn't ignore. A local community talent show had announced auditions. It wasn't a big stage, but it was a chance to play in front of real people, to show her music to the world beyond her bedroom. Her friends encouraged her, though they didn't fully grasp how serious she was about this. "Just have fun," they told her, smiling. "Don't worry about being perfect." She smiled back politely, but inside she felt a mix of excitement and nerves. This wasn't just fun for her, it was important. When she arrived at the venue for auditions, the place was buzzing with energy. Kids, teenagers, and adults were practicing and talking excitedly. Some were dancers stretching, some were singers running scales, and some were just there to watch. She carried her music sheet carefully, almost like a fragile treasure, and tried to blend in. She wasn't loud or flashy. She didn't wear anything that would draw attention. She just wanted to play her piece and let the music speak for itself. As she waited for her turn, the event organizer approached her. He was kind but seemed a little unsure about what she could do. "You're new here, right?" he asked. She nodded. "I'm sure you'll do fine. Why don't you pick something easy, something simple? Just to start. Don't want you to get nervous on your first time." She paused for a moment. Easy? Simple? That wasn't what she had prepared. She had chosen a piece that was challenging, something that pushed her limits, a piece that could carry the emotions she felt inside but didn't know how to say out loud. It was complicated, yes, but she had practiced it for months, and she knew she could play it perfectly if she stayed focused. She wanted to tell him, but she didn't. Instead, she nodded politely again. The familiar act of compliance settling over her. She stepped away from him and sat down at the piano in the audition room. Her hands hovered over the keys for a moment. The room was small, quiet, and plain. The walls were beige, the floor was wooden, and there were just a few chairs for the judges. It didn't feel intimidating, but it did feel real, like this was the first step into a larger world. She took a deep breath and looked at the music in front of her. As she prepared, her mind wandered back to the long hours she had spent alone with her piano. She remembered the first time she learned a complex chord and how proud she had felt. She remembered staying up late into the night, practicing scales, her fingers bleeding sometimes, but her heart full of determination. She thought about the times she had wanted to give up but didn't. She thought about the emotions she wanted to convey, the sadness she carried quietly, the joy she sometimes felt in small moments, the longing to be understood without speaking a word. The first few notes were soft, almost hesitant. She tested the keys and felt the familiar weight of the music beneath her fingers. But soon the hesitancy faded, replaced by a calm certainty. She closed her eyes, and it was as if the world around her disappeared. There was no judge, no audience, no nervous whispers. There was only the piano, and the music flowing from her heart. Even though she was told to play something easy, she didn't She began the piece she had prepared, the one she had poured herself into. Each note came out clear and deliberate, each phrase carrying emotion. She played with control, passion, and precision. She was in her element, the shy girl from the background transforming into someone commanding attention without even trying. The music was her voice, louder and clearer than words ever could be, outside the audition room. Other participants were warming up, chatting, and sometimes glancing toward her door. They didn't hear it yet, but even if they had, they might not have expected the depth of what she was about to do. She wasn't performing for anyone else's approval, she was performing for the truth of her own heart. And that authenticity would make her stand out in a way that no flashy show could. Time seemed to stretch as she continued. She poured everything into her performance, the complexity of the piece matching the intensity of her emotions. Each hand moved with purpose, sometimes soft and delicate, other times strong and dramatic. She felt every note resonate inside her, the highs lifting her spirits, the lows pulling at memories she had long kept hidden. She was telling a story, not just playing a sequence of notes. When she finally lifted her hands from the piano at the end, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then the judges looked up, eyes wide, trying to process what they had just heard. For her, it wasn't about applause or recognition. It was about being true to herself, showing the world what she could do. She felt lighter somehow, as if the music had carried away months of doubt and fear. Walking out of the room, she felt a small smile tug at her lips. Even if no one else truly understood what had just happened, she did. She had taken a risk, ignored the suggestion to play something easy, and trusted herself. And in that moment, that was enough. As she left the audition area, she felt something shift inside her. The quiet girl who had always hidden in the background realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to shrink to fit into someone else's expectations. Her music could speak for her, and maybe one day, the world would listen. The experience stayed with her for days afterward. Even when she was at home, practicing or doing chores, she kept replaying the feeling of letting the music flow freely. She thought about how many times she had doubted herself, how many times she had been told she should stick to simple things, and how much stronger she felt when she chose to follow her own path. Music wasn't just notes on a page. It wasn't just a hobby. It was her courage, her voice, her story. And for the first time, she felt that sharing it might not be as scary as she had always imagined. After the audition, she couldn't stop thinking about the piano, about the music, and about the moment she had finally let herself play without holding back. It wasn't just the performance that stayed with her, it was the feeling of freedom she had experienced. The way the music had carried her somewhere beyond herself, beyond the small worries and doubts that had always followed her. Even though she didn't know what the judges had thought or whether she would be chosen for the next round, she realized something important. She had discovered a strength she hadn't fully recognized before. At home, the old piano sat in its usual corner of the living room. The keys were slightly yellowed and a few made odd sounds when pressed too hard, but to her it was perfect. She walked over slowly, almost reverently, and let her fingers hover above the keys. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft rustle of leaves outside the window. She started to play again, not for anyone else, not for the audition or any kind of recognition, but simply for herself. The familiar notes filled the space, comforting and familiar, yet somehow different from before. As she played, her mind wandered back to how it had all begun. She remembered being a little child, curious about the sounds coming from the piano her parents had borrowed from a distant relative. She remembered the awe she had felt when she pressed a key and a note rang out. At first, it was just fun pushing keys randomly, listening to the sounds, but soon it became more. She wanted to understand how to make the music she heard in her mind come alive. She wanted to learn the songs that seemed to have their own emotions, melodies that could make people feel something even if they didn't know why. Her journey hadn't been easy. She had no formal teacher, no structured lessons, just her own curiosity and determination. Many times she had struggled, hitting wrong notes, misreading the sheet music, or simply feeling frustrated when her fingers refused to move the way she wanted them to. There were nights when she felt like giving up, when the piano seemed more like a source of stress than joy. But something always kept her going, a quiet voice inside that told her the music was worth it, that she was capable, and that one day her efforts would matter. She remembered one evening in particular. She had been trying to master a piece that was far beyond her level at the time. Her fingers stumbled constantly, and every mistake seemed magnified in the empty room. She had wanted to throw the music sheet across the floor and give up completely. But then she stopped, took a deep breath, and listened to the melody in her mind. Slowly, patiently, she started again. Note by note, measure by measure, she played the piece until her fingers knew what to do almost without thinking. That evening she didn't just learn a song, she learned patience, persistence, and the quiet power of believing in herself. That same determination had brought her to the audition. And now, after that first experience of performing in front of others, she felt something new, confidence. Not the kind that made her loud or outgoing, but a quiet confidence. The kind that comes from knowing your own value even if the world doesn't notice at first. She realized that her music wasn't just a hobby or a way to pass the time, it was a reflection of her, a part of her identity. Every note she played carried her story, her struggles, her joys, and even her fears. The next few days after the audition were filled with a strange mix of anticipation and normal life. She went to school, completed her chores, and helped her family as she always did. But the memory of the piano followed her everywhere. Sometimes she would sit in her room during breaks, closing her eyes and imagining herself playing again, feeling the keys beneath her fingers and letting the music flow naturally. Other times she would hum melodies quietly while washing dishes or walking down the street, her mind dancing with rhythms and harmonies that seemed to belong only to her. Her parents noticed a change in her. She seemed more at peace, more focused, and yet there was an energy in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Her mother asked her if the audition had been stressful, and she simply shook her head. It was fine, she said, though she didn't mention how alive it had made her feel. She didn't need to explain. The music itself carried the story of what she had experienced. Her father, too, seemed to notice, giving her a small smile when she passed him in the kitchen. He didn't fully understand what it meant to be driven by music, but he could sense that it mattered to her in a way that was rare and important. One evening she decided to go further. She wanted to challenge herself again, to take on pieces that were even more complicated, pieces that seemed almost impossible. She carefully selected a new song, one that required precise timing, fast movements, and delicate control. It was a piece that demanded full attention and complete focus. She knew it would take hours, perhaps days, to play it correctly, but that didn't scare her. In fact, it excited her. The thought of creating something beautiful from difficulty, of proving to herself that she could do it, filled her with purpose. As she began practicing, she noticed how her skills had improved over time. Her fingers moved more fluidly, her sense of rhythm was sharper, and her ability to feel the music deepened. It wasn't just technique, it was understanding. She was learning to listen to the music inside herself, to sense how each note should sound, how each pause should breathe. With every repetition, the piece became more alive, more expressive, until it felt like the piano was an extension of her body, responding instantly to her emotions. This journey wasn't just about perfection. She stumbled, she made mistakes, and she sometimes grew frustrated. But each mistake taught her something new, a better way to position her hands, a new approach to timing, a way to interpret the melody with more feeling. She started to see her mistakes not as failures but as stepping stones. The piano, in its quiet and patient way, was teaching her resilience, persistence, and creativity. Her friends began to notice subtle changes too. When she talked about music, her eyes sparkled in a way they hadn't before. She shared small snippets of her practice, letting them hear little melodies, and their surprise and admiration encouraged her. It wasn't about praise, she didn't need it, but it was comforting to see that her passion could touch others. Music had always been her personal escape, but now it felt like it had the power to connect, to make others feel something real. Meanwhile, she started thinking more seriously about what performing in public really meant. The audition had been small, and the audience had been limited, but it had given her a glimpse of something larger, the ability to share her inner world, to reach people without speaking, to create emotion through sound. It was a responsibility in a way, but one she welcomed. She wanted to play pieces that weren't just technically impressive, but emotionally moving. She wanted her music to leave a mark, to stay in people's minds and hearts long after the notes faded. She also began exploring different styles and composers. She studied recordings, watched tutorials, and experimented with improvisation. She discovered that music was limitless. It could be joyful, sorrowful, exciting, or soothing. She started creating small arrangements of her own, blending melodies she loved with new rhythms she imagined. It was thrilling, liberating, and sometimes terrifying. But each time she completed a piece, she felt a quiet pride that made all the hard work worth it. The piano became more than an instrument, it became her companion. In moments of doubt or sadness, she would play. In moments of joy, she would play. Music became the thread that connected her emotions, her dreams, and her reality. And even though she remained quiet and humble in her daily life, inside, a fire was growing. A fire fueled by creativity, determination, and the simple but profound joy of expressing herself. As days turned into weeks, she realized that the audition had been only the beginning. It had opened a door not just to opportunities but to self-discovery. She understood now that talent was not enough. Courage, persistence, and heart were equally important. She had shown herself that she could face challenges, overcome doubts, and embrace the unknown. And more than anything, she had learned that her music mattered not just to her, but potentially to anyone who would listen. With this understanding, she made a quiet promise to herself. She would continue to practice, to grow, to take risks, and to share her music whenever possible. She would not shrink to fit expectations or settle for easy. She would honor the journey that had brought her here. The countless hours of dedication, the small victories, the setbacks, and the quiet moments of triumph. Every note she played would carry that promise, a testament to her passion, her resilience, and her heart. And in that promise, she found peace. The fear of failure no longer felt so overwhelming. The doubts that had haunted her for years were still there, but they were now tempered by confidence and determination. She understood that music was not about perfection. It was about honesty, courage, and connection. It was about letting the world hear a piece of her soul. For the first time, she felt ready not just for the next audition, but for whatever challenges lay ahead. The piano, the music, and the countless hours of practice had transformed her. She was no longer just the quiet girl in the background. She was someone who had discovered the power of her own voice, someone who could face the world one note at a time, and someone... The day of the talent show finally arrived. She woke up early, even though there was no real reason to, and felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that made her stomach twist in knots. Her hands were slightly shaky, her heart beating faster than usual. She tried to calm herself with deep breaths, but the reality of performing in front of a crowd was suddenly very real. This wasn't just practice anymore. This was a real stage, real people, and a real chance to show who she was. She spent the morning preparing quietly. She went over her music sheets carefully, checking every note, every pause, every dynamic marking. She ran her fingers over the keys of her home piano one last time, letting the familiar touch of the instrument remind her of all the hours she had spent learning, practicing, and dreaming. With each note, she felt her confidence grow. She remembered all the nights she had stayed up practicing, all the small victories she had achieved, and all the moments she had refused to give up. Those memories gave her strength. When she arrived at the venue, the atmosphere was alive with chatter, laughter, and nervous energy. People were warming up, moving between rooms, adjusting microphones, stretching, or reviewing their pieces. The room felt bigger and more intimidating than she had imagined. She could see performers of all ages, some clearly experienced and confident, others just as nervous as she was. She felt a tiny flicker of doubt, but she pushed it aside. She reminded herself that this was her moment, and that her preparation had brought her here. Backstage, the event organizer approached her again. He smiled politely, but his eyes held the same doubt as before. "Are you sure you want to play that piece?" Maybe something easier would be better, just to warm up the audience. She nodded politely, not saying a word. Inside, she felt a surge of determination. She had worked too hard to shrink back now. She wanted to play what she had prepared, the piece that truly represented her. No matter how difficult it was, sitting down at the piano in the performance room, she felt a sudden rush of silence fall over her. The stage was set, the lights were soft, and the audience was waiting. She took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs completely, and then exhaled slowly. Her fingers hovered over the keys, almost trembling at first, but she remembered every hour of practice, every note she had mastered, every moment of persistence. This was the time to let the music take over. The first note sounded, soft and hesitant, filling the room with a quiet anticipation. For a heartbeat, the audience seemed unaware of the power that was about to come. But slowly, as the melody unfolded, the piece began to grow. Her hands moved with precision and emotion, each note carrying weight and meaning. The music wasn't just sound, it was a story, a reflection of her journey, her struggles. And her heart, she could feel the audience leaning forward in their seats. The judges, at first skeptical, were suddenly paying close attention. They hadn't expected someone so quiet and small to produce such depth and technical skill. Each measure she played revealed more than just her ability, it revealed her passion, her dedication, and her soul. The room was silent except for the music. As if the world had paused to listen. As she continued, the piece grew in complexity and emotion. There were moments of quiet tenderness where each note seemed to float in the air, delicate and fragile. There were moments of intensity where her fingers moved quickly and powerfully, expressing feelings that words could never capture. Her body leaned into the music, her eyes closed at times, letting the sound guide her. She wasn't thinking about mistakes or judgment, she was completely absorbed in the moment. Fully present with the music, she noticed small reactions from the audience. A few people had their eyes closed, swaying slightly to the rhythm. Some held their hands near their faces, caught up in the emotion. The judge's eyes widened at the technical mastery and the emotional depth of the performance. She didn't see them as critics anymore, she saw them as listeners. Experiencing the story she had been waiting to tell for so long, there was a moment during the middle of the piece when her fingers slipped slightly, hitting a wrong note. For an instant, her heart skipped a beat. But she didn't pause. She adjusted immediately, letting the music carry on naturally, not letting the small mistake break the flow. It was in that moment that she realized something important. Music wasn't about perfection. It was about expression, about courage, about letting yourself be vulnerable and showing the truth of who you were. The final section of the piece approached, and she felt a surge of energy. The music built to a crescendo, powerful and commanding. Her fingers moved faster, her body leaning into the motion, her heart fully engaged. The notes soared and then softened, drawing the listeners into a wave of emotion that felt almost tangible. Every person in the room seemed caught in the spell, held by the intensity and beauty of the performance. When she played the last note, there was a heartbeat of silence. The room seemed to hold its breath, not quite believing what they had just heard. And then, slowly, applause began. It started softly, but quickly grew, filling the room with warmth and appreciation. People stood, clapping enthusiastically, some with tears in their eyes. The judges exchanged surprised glances, nodding and smiling in admiration. For the first time, she felt the music come full circle from her private world into the hearts of others. She sat there for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to let it all sink in. Her hands still hovered above the keys, feeling the lingering vibrations of the final notes. She realized she had done more than just perform. She had shared a part of herself that had been hidden for so long, a part that was brave, passionate, and alive. The applause wasn't just recognition, it was validation. A sign that the music she had poured herself into had reached others, had moved them, had touched them, backstage. The organizer came rushing over, looking astonished. I didn't expect that, he said, shaking his head. You were amazing. Truly amazing. She smiled quietly, feeling a mix of relief and pride. She didn't need to boast, her music had spoken for her. The acknowledgement from someone who had doubted her only made the moment sweeter. In the days that followed, people who had attended the show came up to her, praising her performance, asking questions, and sharing how the music had made them feel. Some said they had felt chills, others said they had felt like crying, and a few admitted they had been surprised that someone so quiet could have such power and control over the piano. Each compliment felt like a confirmation that her dedication and courage had been worth it. She also began reflecting on what the performance had taught her. She realized that fear and doubt were natural, but they didn't have to control her. Taking risks, trusting her preparation, and staying true to herself had allowed her to create something beautiful and meaningful. The experience also taught her that people's expectations didn't define her. The advice to play something easy had been well-meaning, but she had chosen to follow her own path, and the results were far beyond what anyone had imagined. The performance also gave her a new perspective on her future. She understood that music could open doors, connect her to others, and provide opportunities she hadn't dreamed of. But more than that, it showed her the importance of self-belief and courage. She had learned that even when others underestimate you, your dedication, passion, and honesty can surprise them, and sometimes even yourself. That night, as she sat alone in her room, replaying the events of the day in her mind, she felt a quiet joy that was hard to describe. The world outside her window was calm and still, but inside she felt energized and alive. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys of her piano, smiling as she remembered the faces in the audience, the sound of their applause, and the feeling of music flowing through her completely. She knew the journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more performances, and more moments of doubt. But she also knew something powerful. She had found her voice, and nothing could take that away. The music was hers, and it would continue to carry her forward, guiding her through fear, doubt, and uncertainty. For the first time, she didn't just play music, she lived it. She didn't just perform for an audience, she connected with them, shared a piece of her soul, and discovered the extraordinary power of being brave enough to take a risk. That moment, that performance, would stay with her forever. A reminder that passion, courage, and dedication could transform not only a single performance, but the way she saw herself and her place in the world. And as she lay in bed that night, exhausted but happy, she thought about what came next. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but she felt ready. Ready to practice harder, ready to explore new music, ready to take more risks, and ready to keep sharing her gift with the world. The stage had shown her what she was capable of, but more importantly, it had shown her what she was willing to give her heart. Her dedication and her music. In the quiet darkness of her room, she whispered to herself a simple truth she had finally realized. It wasn't about playing something easy. It was about daring to play something real, something meaningful, and something that came from the very core of who she was. And that, she knew, was just the beginning. When she finished playing, the room was silent for a moment that felt longer than any silence she had ever experienced. It wasn't an awkward silence, but a quiet pause where everyone seemed to be holding their breath, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The music still lingered in the air, vibrating softly as if refusing to leave the room so quickly. She sat at the piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys, her heart still racing, her chest filled with a strange mix of relief and anticipation. She knew she had given everything, but she also knew the real reaction was yet to come. Then, slowly, the first clap rang out. It was gentle at first, hesitant, like someone testing the waters. And then another, louder, more certain. And then it happened one by one. People in the audience started clapping, until the sound swelled into a thunderous roar that filled the hall. She looked up, a little stunned, as she saw people standing, cheering, and even wiping tears from their eyes. Some of the older audience members, who had come expecting a simple performance, looked amazed, their mouths slightly open as they shook their heads in disbelief. She had expected applause, of course, but nothing could have prepared her for this. The sound of appreciation, the energy radiating from the crowd, and the look of astonishment on the judges' faces made her realize just how much her performance had affected people. For the first time, she understood the true power of music, not just as something to practice or enjoy privately, but as something that could move others, inspire them, and make them feel emotions they didn't even know they were carrying. The judges were the first to rise, their expressions a mixture of surprise and admiration. They were clapping, nodding, and exchanging glances that said more than words ever could. One of them even whispered to the person next to them, and she caught the slight smile, the subtle shake of the head that indicated genuine astonishment. They hadn't expected her quiet demeanor and small frame to conceal such incredible skill and depth of feeling. It was a reminder that appearances could be deceiving and that talent often hides in the most unlikely places. People began approaching her after the performance, still applauding, still wide-eyed. "That was incredible," one said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've never heard anything like that." Another person smiled broadly, eyes glistening, and said, "You made me feel every note. Thank you for sharing this." She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of pride and gratitude. She wasn't used to receiving so much attention or praise, and yet it felt right. Because it wasn't for her ego, it was for the music. For the story she had poured into every note. She noticed that some of the younger performers, who had been practicing their own acts just moments before, were staring at her in awe. She didn't say anything. She just smiled softly. It was enough to see that her courage, her willingness to play something difficult and meaningful, had left an impression. She realized that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay true to yourself, even when others expect something simple or easy. That authenticity resonated far more than any attempt to please others. Backstage, the event organizer finally approached her, looking almost speechless. I didn't know what to expect," he said, shaking his head. "I told you to play something easy, but this was extraordinary. I can't believe I underestimated you." She smiled quietly, feeling a sense of vindication but not arrogance. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving to herself that she could trust her own abilities, that she could follow her instincts and create something powerful. In the following moments, cameras and phones appeared as people wanted to capture her performance. Some wanted to remember it for themselves, while others wanted to share it with friends or family who hadn't been there. She felt a little shy, a little overwhelmed, but also proud. Every second of practice, every long night of dedication, every moment of self-doubt that she had overcome had led to this instant. The applause, the smiles, the astonished looks, they weren't just for the notes she had played. They were for the heart she had put into them. She took a quiet moment to reflect on what had just happened. The piece she had chosen had been difficult, filled with complex rhythms and emotional depth. It had been a risk to play it in front of others, to defy the suggestion to keep things simple. But that risk had paid off in ways she hadn't imagined. Not only had she proved her own strength, but she had also touched the lives of the audience, even if only for a brief moment. That was the true reward. More than applause or recognition, it was the connection. The unspoken understanding that music could create between people. As the crowd continued to react, she noticed a few familiar faces among the audience. Teachers, neighbors, and friends had come to watch, and their eyes were shining with pride. She realized that her performance had not only surprised strangers but had also impacted those who knew her best. The quiet girl they had always known, the one who had spent countless hours practicing in private, had revealed a side of herself that they had never seen before. They were witnessing the culmination of years of dedication, courage, and love for music. After the show, she walked through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging brief words with people who wanted to tell her how moved they had been. She felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her body ached from the intensity of the performance. Her fingers tingled from the rapid movements, and her mind was buzzing with adrenaline. And yet, amid all of that, there was a calm satisfaction, a sense of completeness. She had given everything she had, and the result was more beautiful than she could have imagined. That night, when she returned home, she found herself replaying the events over and over in her mind. She thought about the way the audience had leaned forward, hanging on to every note. She remembered the looks on the judges' faces, The applause that had started softly and grown into a roar, and the way her music had filled the room completely. She realized that her performance had been more than just a demonstration of skill, it had been an act of courage, vulnerability, and self-expression. She also began to think about the larger lessons she had learned. People often judge others by appearances or first impressions, assuming that someone quiet or small might not have the ability to surprise or inspire. She had experienced that firsthand, from the organizer who suggested she play something easy to the initial doubts of the audience. But by staying true to herself and embracing the challenge, she had transformed those expectations. She understood now that the courage to trust herself, to take risks, and to follow her own instincts was just as important as technical skill. In the days following the show, she received messages, compliments, and invitations she hadn't expected. Local music teachers reached out, offering encouragement and advice. A few people even suggested opportunities for workshops, performances, and further competitions. It was a world she hadn't imagined she could enter, and yet it was opening up before her, piece by piece, note by note. She felt both humbled and inspired. She also reflected on how the experience had changed her perception of herself. Before the performance, she had always been cautious, doubting whether her music was good enough, whether her efforts were worthwhile. But now she realized that her dedication, her heart, and her authenticity had value. She didn't need validation from everyone, but experiencing the genuine reaction of the audience had shown her that her voice, her music, and her passion could truly make a difference. As she sat at her piano later that evening, the quiet of her room surrounding her, she began to play again, not for an audience, not for recognition, but for herself. The notes flowed easily, naturally, and with renewed confidence. She experimented with new rhythms, explored subtle changes in dynamics, and allowed herself to improvise in ways she had never dared before. The experience of performing had unlocked something new within her, a freedom to explore, to create, and to express without fear. For the first time, she felt that music wasn't just a skill or a hobby, it was a calling, a way to communicate, a bridge between her inner world and the outside. She realized that the applause, the astonished looks, and the recognition were only the beginning. The true reward was in the connection she created, the emotions she shared, and the confidence she gained to keep growing, learning, and performing. By the end of the night, she felt exhausted but alive. The adrenaline had faded slightly, leaving her with a calm sense of accomplishment. She thought about the audience, the judges, and the reactions that had followed. But most importantly, she thought about herself, the quiet girl who had dared to play something difficult, who had poured her heart into every note, and who had discovered a strength she hadn't fully realized existed. And as she closed her eyes and let herself rest, she understood something profound. Music had the power to change moments, to touch hearts, and to reveal the courage hidden inside. Her performance had not only stunned the audience, but had also transformed her, opening the door to a future filled with possibility, creativity, and expression. She knew that this was just one step in a long journey, but it was a step she would never forget, a moment that would stay with her forever, and a reminder of what she could achieve when she trusted herself completely. The days that followed her performance were a whirlwind. It wasn't just the praise or the attention that she was trying to process, it was something deeper. She had always loved music, always found peace in it, but now she was seeing it differently. Now, it wasn't just a personal escape. It was something that could change lives, including her own. It wasn't about the applause anymore. It wasn't about proving herself to anyone. It was about understanding the power of her gift, and realizing that she had a responsibility to honor it fully. Her inbox was filled with messages from people she didn't know. Some of them were teachers, others were music lovers, and there were a few who had simply been in the audience that day. They all shared something in common. They had been moved by her performance. "Your music really spoke to me," one message read. "It made me feel things I didn't expect. Keep playing, please." Another message said, "You have something rare. Don't let anyone tell you to play something easy again." Each message made her heart swell, but it also made her feel the weight of her potential. She realized that what she had done wasn't just for her, it had affected others in ways she hadn't imagined. Still, despite the praise, a small part of her was unsure of what to do next. She had stepped onto the stage and shown herself in a way she never had before, but where did that leave her now? Was she ready to embrace the next challenge? Or had she reached the peak of what she could do? These questions circled in her mind as she tried to settle back into her daily routine. Her family noticed a change in her. It wasn't just the way she was carrying herself more confident, more sure of her abilities, but it was also in the way she spoke about music. There was a fire in her words now. "I want to keep pushing myself," she told her parents one evening. "I want to play more, learn more, maybe even perform more. I feel like I can do so much more than I thought." Her parents, always supportive, smiled at each other, their eyes filled with pride. They had always known that music was a part of her soul, but now they saw how deeply it had become intertwined with her identity. Her mother, who had always encouraged her but never pressured her, gave her a simple piece of advice: keep playing from your heart, and never forget why you started in the first place. That advice stuck with her. It was easy to get caught up in the idea of impressing others, of being recognized for her talent. But at the core of it, music was always about how it made her feel, about how it allowed her to express emotions that words alone couldn't capture. As the weeks passed, she found herself practicing even more. She pushed herself further than she ever had before, experimenting with more complex pieces, playing at different speeds, and learning to incorporate her emotions into every note. Every time she sat at the piano, she felt herself grow a little stronger, a little more confident in her abilities. She wasn't playing for an audience anymore. She was playing for herself, for the joy it brought her, for the sense of purpose it gave her. It wasn't just the technical side of music that she was improving. It was the emotional connection she had to the music. She began to understand the subtle nuances of each piece, how to bring out the hidden meaning behind the notes. She started to see how a simple melody could carry so much emotion, how a change in rhythm could shift the mood of an entire song. It wasn't enough to just play the notes right. She had to feel them too. Her music, once just a hobby, was now a way of life. It had become a way for her to navigate the world, to understand herself, and to connect with others. But it wasn't just about performance anymore. She had started composing her own music, creating melodies and harmonies that came straight from her heart. Sometimes she would just sit at the piano with no particular plan in mind, letting the music flow out of her naturally. Other times she would write down ideas, experiment with different chords, and gradually build a song from scratch. Each new composition felt like a piece of her soul, and the more she created, the more she realized how much music was a part of who she was. One afternoon, after weeks of practicing, she was invited to perform again. This time, it wasn't at a talent show or a small local event. It was at a larger event, a recital in front of a bigger audience, many of whom were music professionals and enthusiasts. She had never played in front of such an experienced crowd before, and the nerves came rushing back. Her mind wandered to the last performance, to the doubts that had crept in right before she stepped on stage. She remembered the fear, the uncertainty, and how, in the end, she had been able to let go of it all and just play. But now, with the stakes higher, those feelings of doubt resurfaced. She didn't want to disappoint anyone. She didn't want to fall short of their expectations. But then she remembered something. She wasn't playing to meet anyone's expectations anymore. She was playing to share something that was hers, her own feelings, her own story. This time, before she walked onto the stage, she paused. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and let herself feel the music inside her. She reminded herself that it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest. And if she stayed true to herself, the audience would understand. When she sat at the piano again, the first note felt different. It felt like an extension of herself, a reflection of everything she had learned. She wasn't just playing the piece, she was living it. Her fingers moved with confidence. The sound filled the room, and she knew, deep down, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the piece came to a close, she felt the familiar silence settle over the room, just like before. She held her breath for a moment, unsure of what to expect. And then, like magic, the applause started, again slow at first, hesitant, but then growing louder and louder until the entire room was filled with it. She looked up, slightly stunned, but this time, the applause didn't feel like a surprise. It felt like the natural result of what she had given. She wasn't shocked by the response. She was at peace with it. She had played from her heart, and that was enough. Backstage, once again, people approached her, congratulating her and telling her how much they had enjoyed her performance. She smiled and thanked them, but this time, the words didn't feel as overwhelming. She didn't need to absorb every compliment or praise. She understood now that her value wasn't tied to external validation, it was tied to the music itself, to the act of sharing her gift with the world. The experience also taught her something important about growth. Even though she had made so much progress, there was always more to learn. There would always be new challenges, new songs to master, new emotions to explore. But she had learned to embrace the process. It wasn't about rushing to be the best or achieving perfection, it was about being present in every moment, enjoying the journey and giving everything she had to the music. One day, she received a call from a local music school. They had heard about her performances and they wanted to offer her a scholarship to attend their program. She was stunned. It felt like a dream, a real, tangible opportunity to pursue music in a way she had never imagined. But even as she considered the offer, she realized something. Whether she accepted the scholarship or not, music would always be a part of her life. It wasn't about the recognition or the accolades, it was about the joy of creating, of sharing, and of connecting with others through her music. That night, as she sat at her piano again, she thought about everything that had brought her to this point. The doubts, the struggles, the moments of uncertainty, all of it had led her here. She wasn't the same person she had been before the audition, before the performance. She was stronger, more confident, and more connected to her music than ever before. And for the first time, she realized that this journey wasn't just about becoming a great musician. It was about becoming the kind of person who was brave enough to follow their passion, no matter the obstacles. It was about understanding that the journey itself was just as valuable as the destination. With a smile on her face, she played one final note, letting the sound fill the room. She knew that no matter where her music took her next, she had already found something more important than fame or recognition. She had found herself, and that, she realized, was the most beautiful music of all.